Hi everybody and welcome back to Lost Genre Reddit Stories. This post is from the subreddit entitled People and it's by user Coffee Fanatic. My entitled ex-family shows up at my job. Background: my ex-husband Bill divorced me under false pretenses. I thought we were splitting up amicably because of us being incompatible and it was a stressful relationship, but of course, it was all a lie. He was cheating on me. He had been seeing some other woman since right after my youngest son was born. On top of that, he abandoned our kids. After that, I got in shape, took pole dancing lessons and got a job I love as an exotic dancer. Bill didn't like that I got hot and moved on from him and made a huge stink about the whole thing. That didn't go well for him. And now you're all caught up. So, Bill showed up at my effing job during the biggest event of the year with my ex-in-laws. Every year at my job there is a Christmas-themed party. The dancers dress up as sexy elves, my boss dresses up as Santa, the bartenders dress up as reindeer, and the bouncers dress up as snowmen. The place is beautifully decorated as a winter wonderland with a huge throne for my boss to sit on and custom poles for the dancers to dance around him. It's a huge thing at my job and it is always one of the highest grossing nights of the year. It's advertised all over town that people can come, get their pictures taken with us, sit on Santa's lap, and enjoy a fun evening with custom Christmas music made by a DJ. We even have Christmas-themed drinks, guys, and they are so good. I was so excited about it because I started working there this year, so it was my first time being part of this event. I was dancing that evening, so I was dressed up as a sexy elf. I was feeling great. It was pretty late into the evening, around midnight, when this incident took place. I was dancing on stage when out of nowhere I heard the shrieking sound of my ex-mother-in-law crying. I turned around and there they were, ex-mother-in-law, ex-father-in-law, and effing Bill, my ex. Ex-mother-in-law was slapping Bill's arm and pointing at me. I couldn't make out what she was saying over the music. All I could hear was the shrill sound of her voice. I started looking around for Kyle, my boyfriend. I couldn't see him, but I did see other bouncers, so I waved at them, trying to get their attention. We have a special wave that when a bouncer sees it, they know to come running. Bill comes to the stage and starts shouting at me while the men around him were waving cash at me. He tells me to come down and to come with him, that I was bringing shame to his family. I ignored him. I saw a couple of bouncers heading for us, so I kept dancing, believing I was saved. That was protocol. Call the bouncer and keep working to avoid making a scene. It was then I felt someone grab my ankle and pull. In my panic, I fall and let out a scream. I look up and it's Bill. He had pulled himself onto the stage and grabbed me. I start kicking at him with my other foot until the bouncers finally got there and pulled him away from me. I feel someone else grab me and I screamed again, but when I look up, I saw it was Kyle. Bill and my ex-in-laws were taken into the office, while I was taken backstage to ride out the panic attack. Kyle held me until I calmed down. The police were called and I got to watch as Bill was forced into the back of a police cruiser in handcuffs. He's being charged with public disturbance, assault, and trespassing. My boss was talking to my ex-in-laws, telling them not to come back and warning them the police would be called if they did. Despite how pissed he was, my boss was pretty calm and polite. I then heard my ex-mother-in-law shouting about how she was going to take me to court to take my children away from me because a godless floozy like me wasn't fit to be a mother. I couldn't take hearing that and I rushed at her. Kyle had to grab me and stop me, but I was screaming at her that she was a psychopath and she would never get her hands on my kids again, that she had raised a lying, cheating, emotionally abusive scumbag. She raised a hand to slap me, but the bouncers and police got between us. She and ex-father-in-law got into their car and drove off after being threatened with arrest. After calm had been restored, we all went back inside and resumed the party. I made good money that night. Even Samantha, my job's entitled gossip, couldn't deny what Bill and my ex-in-laws did was crazy. Over the weekend, I got a call from someone claiming to be Bill's ex-girlfriend, the one he cheated on me with. I asked her how she got my number and she said she had her ways. She said she decided to call me after Bill called her begging to get bailed out. She told me that during their relationship, ex-mother-in-law treated her like crap and compared me and her a lot and always acted like she wasn't good enough. She was relieved when they went to Greece, believing her and Bill's relationship could be salvaged at that point, but she was wrong. Bill would also talk about me a lot, and she was always crying about being compared to his ex. When I got the job at the club, his behavior became more erratic. She told me that she confronted him after he was thrown out of the club because word travels fast and she heard about the whole thing. He got pissed, physically assaulted her, and then threw her out of his house. She got him arrested and he was fired from his job as a result. I thanked her for the information and promptly told her to never call me again. She asked me why, and I told her that she had no issue with being Bill's affair partner and hurting his wife, me, and kids, and that she was only calling me to get back at him for what he's done to her. I hung up and blocked her. I plan to go file for a restraining order today, but now I'm armed with more information that will make the process so much easier and go so much faster. Win for me. Merry Christmas, everyone. Smiley face. Nice, OP. This was a huge win for you. Not only did your crappy ex get arrested and you got to see that, but you also got to tell off the woman he was cheating on you with while you guys were married. Not that it mattered anyway, because you totally moved on from that whole thing, but it still must be a nice feeling to get that off your chest. Now, OP wasn't asking for advice or any kind of insight, so I'm not gonna read community comments and we're gonna move on straight to the update, which apparently is even better than the first part of the story. But before that, I'm gonna share with you all another one of my playlists like this one that only has updated stories. Now let's continue with the update. In my last post, you all read how my ex-in-laws and ex-husband Bill showed up at my job during the biggest event of the year. I am an exotic dancer and bartender at my current job. My ex is bitter that I am now in the best shape of my life and I look damn good compared to when he and I were together. I am dating an amazing guy named Kyle and my kids are doing great. On to the crazy. So, after my ex-in-laws were banned from my job, I sought the counsel of an attorney. I didn't want to wait it out anymore in hopes that they would just go away as I have in the past. I'm going for the jugular with this, so to speak. I filed for an emergency restraining order, citing that my kids and I aren't safe around my ex-mother-in-law and ex-husband. Ex-father-in-law is just a shell that lets ex-mother-in-law get away with crap and doesn't put her in her place. My restraining order was granted temporarily within 24 hours, thanks to all of the evidence I was able to provide. My ex-in-laws and Bill both were served that very same day. We had a hearing on the day before Christmas Eve where I was able to plead my case and the judge got to see all of the evidence I had proving why Bill and my ex-mother-in-law are dangerous for me and my kids. Ex-mother-in-law tried to pull a classic tactic of crying and wailing whenever I talked, so the judge would have to stop the proceedings to tell her to shut the F up. Eventually, I got through what I wanted to say and showed what I wanted. Then ex-mother-in-law and Bill were given the chance to say their piece. Ex-mother-in-law shushed Bill and completely stuck her foot into her mouth by blabbering on about religion and how God is judging me for not coming home to my husband's rule. The judge reminded her that Bill and I are legally divorced, and ex-mother-in-law shouted at him that no power on earth has the right to sever a marriage that is morally and spiritually binding forever. I was chosen to be Bill's wife by God, and I will honor it or there will be consequences. The judge asked her what she meant, and ex-mother-in-law tried to play coy and say, OP will see. The judge then asked Bill to say his piece. Bill looked uncomfortable. He tried to stand up, but ex-mother-in-law grabbed his arm and told him to sit down. The judge threatened to hold her in contempt, and she let go, grumbling at him. Bill then stood up and moved away from ex-mother-in-law. He started ranting about how crazy she is and that he didn't want to be there. He said he thought he could manipulate me into sleeping with him, but he got tossed out on his ass when he tried and he gave up then and there. Ex-mother-in-law is the one that is doing all of this and he wants no part of it anymore. His life is ruined because everything he has done has been in an attempt to appease her and it has blown up in his face. He then begged the judge to uphold the restraining order because ex-mother-in-law told him that she plans to hurt me if I didn't comply with her demands. He said she was dangerous and unhinged and suggested she needed some kind of psychological help. Ex-mother-in-law was effing speechless, but one couldn't deny the look of absolute guilt plastered on her face. Turns out she does need psychological help. Ex-father-in-law stood up and asked to say a few words. The judge agreed because he looked to be entertained by the three-ring circus playing out in front of him. Ex-father-in-law went up to stand beside Bill and confessed to the judge that ex-mother-in-law is suffering from the effects of dementia, and it has been a closely guarded secret between them for the past 2 years. Ex-mother-in-law was receiving treatment but stopped when Bill and I moved away from the old state. Since then, she has gotten worse and he fears what she will do if left allowed to roam free. They have always been religious, but when ex-mother-in-law stopped treatment, she began experiencing psychotic episodes and delusions of grandeur. He also confessed that if I had agreed to let them take my youngest on holiday with them, my ex-mother-in-law had no intention of bringing him back. My jaw hit the floor. Ex-father-in-law looked at me and pled for forgiveness for not putting a stop to the insanity sooner. Bill also apologized for the hell he had put me through, stating he had been an idiot and hoped I could forgive him. Everything seemed to fall into place and things made sense. I never mentioned it, but I did notice whenever I saw ex-mother-in-law, she would be forgetful and stare off into space. She seemed confused at times and sometimes she didn't know who people were. I thought it was an act to avoid dealing with people. It was then I heard ex-mother-in-law shrieking. She got up and ran at ex-father-in-law and began beating on him until the bailiff pulled her off of him. She was put into cuffs and the judge ordered her to undergo 90 days in a psychiatric treatment facility. She screamed, wailed, and kicked as she was carried out of the room. The restraining order was granted for a year. I was completely numb and had no reaction when the verdict was given. I was confused and gobsmacked out of my effing mind at what I had just heard. I almost don't believe it happened and wondered if that edible I ate beforehand to calm my nerves was effing with my head. I spoke to ex-father-in-law after court. He is taking Bill back home to the old state to help him get back on his feet. He promised me he and Bill will never bother me again, and once ex-mother-in-law is released, he will ensure she doesn't either. I went home and hugged my kids, and we went out to look at Christmas lights that night. Christmas was great. Hope yours was too. Extended from OP's comments. I've been researching dementia since that day. I had no idea how horrible it actually was until I started looking more into it. I feel so bad for her, but at the same time, she cannot come near me or my kids while she's like this. Ex-father-in-law told me that Bill had no clue about the diagnosis. Ex-mother-in-law never wanted to show that type of weakness to anyone, especially to her own son. Ex-mother-in-law's recent behavior came as a shock to him, as it did to me, but because he is her son, he went along with it to try to please her. He is a mama's boy, and I can tell this broke him. I learned that ex-mother-in-law was trying to take me to court to take my son away from me. She didn't get far as Bill chose to terminate his rights, and she had only met my youngest once, leaving her high and dry with no legal leg to stand on. I honestly don't know why Bill chose to go along with her insanity. He's always tried pleasing her ever since he was a kid. Ex-father-in-law knew that ex-mother-in-law had no intention of bringing my son back if I let him go on holiday with them, and he was afraid of her. I think once he got into court, he suddenly grew a pair and felt safe enough to confess the truth. Wow, OP, of course it sucks that your ex-mother-in-law is going through all of that, but I'm still gonna count this as a happy update because you and your kids are doing great. You are protected now and apparently you are living your best life, so congratulations on all of it. So all that there's left to say is, thank you so much for sharing, OP, and all the best in the future. Take care. Now, before we move on to the next post, I wanted to ask you guys something. OP has some posts that are prequel to what we just read. So if you guys are interested, let me know and I'll make a video on them too. Now, let's move on to the next post. This post is from the subreddit Malicious Compliance, and it's by user Georgal. The principal of the school asked everyone to be 30 minutes early for the exam. 30 or so hours of overtime were paid and she had to monitor students herself. I'm a teacher. The principal we had at our school was the kind who got in this position because it was a way to escape teaching students. She was a teacher before taking the exam to be principal, which is common, and to flaunt the little authority it got her. One of the issues I had with her was about punctuality. She was especially a hard ass about it, which would have been fine if she weren't systematically late to everything. I loathe hypocrites, and it makes our job especially difficult to ask students to be on time for classes when the principal was half an hour late at a meeting she scheduled herself with the parents. Come the end of the year, and with it, time for the baccalaureate, final exam of high school. The students start to receive their convocations for the exam week. When we see their convocations, we're already pissed because the time is wrong on purpose. It would tell a student they had to be there at 7:30 for a 4-hour test without even telling them the test is actually scheduled to start at 8 and ends at 12. A few days later, the teachers received their own convocations to monitor the tests. It's usual to get them after the students, though it was particularly late this year. For us, the scheduled time of the test is correct, but it was mentioned in each of our convocations that we had to be present 30 minutes before the start of each test. I mean, we aren't going to be present at 8 exactly if the test is scheduled to start at that time. We don't want to screw the students over. We need a few minutes to get the test papers and the students in the classroom so that we can start exactly on time, but 5 minutes is enough, 10 at most. And as teachers, we are used to being there slightly before class starts anyway. Most of us ignored her and came to the exam on time as usual, but a dozen of us decided to comply and we sent her emails tallying up the total numbers of hours we'd been working that week, adding that half hour before each test. She answered some BS that our tallies were wrong because she wasn't counting the half hour. We let that pass. We complied and my colleagues declared their overtime. At the end, that came to about 30 hours of overtime total for doing jack crap that had to be paid. She also did not seem to realize that my email was slightly different than that of my colleagues. Me, that's a bit different because I work part-time. As such, I'm not allowed to do overtime. The reason for that is that both part-time and overtime are paid more than regular hours, so it has to be either or. Come Friday, I sent a new email reminding her about the upcoming issue. No answers. The last 4-hour test of the week starts at 1. At 2:25, I asked my colleague monitoring the next room over, who was in on the plan, to cover for me for 5 minutes. There's a door between the exam rooms. We can stand there and watch both rooms to let the other take a bathroom break or something like that. I go to the principal's office. I remind her that there is a room full of students with 2.5 hours left, and I don't know if she scheduled someone to take over for me, but I've already done all my hours for this week, and since I'm not allowed to do overtime, I'm leaving. Now, as a teacher, I take pride in my punctuality and my ability to finish my speech exactly on time. I also purposefully timed this one. Just after I told her I was leaving, I look at my watch, it was 3 seconds to 2:30. I look at her face while she gathers her thoughts. In 3 seconds, she went from confusion to realization to anger, and just as she was about to answer, it was time, so I turn around and walk away. "What are you doing? Stay here, we are not finished!" I answer without looking back. "Sorry, it's 2:30, my work is done. I'm not being paid to listen to you." I leave while I hear her half-coherent threats. She followed me, of course, but couldn't really talk loudly in the corridors while the exam was taking place. Plus, she still knows that loudly berating a teacher in public in full view of hearing students would be extremely unprofessional, and she's the one who'd get in trouble for that. More importantly, I know where I'm going. I pass in front of the classroom I was monitoring earlier. I thank my colleague, point at the principal who's just catching up, red as a beet, and tell him, "I brought you the principal." I leave as he greets her, thus intercepting her for me. I learned that she had to monitor the students herself, which must have pissed her off something fierce because she leaves early on Fridays. Next week, obviously, she requested that we had a talk in her office. I went with my union representative. We explained to her that it was not difficult to prove that she was the one in the wrong and that if she wanted to escalate the issue, we would have no problem getting it to the administrative tribunal. My union representative also made the open threat of a strike, that I and those who declared their overtime had the support of the union and teaching staff. Oh man, it must have been great to see her face while she was trying to berate you and she got intercepted and had to take care of those students. That must have been awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, OP. And that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch it. Now, if you've gotten to this point in the video, I assume that you like these stories that I'm reading out. So here are a couple more that you might enjoy. And if you don't have any time to watch another story right now, save it for later. And also, don't forget to hit that subscribe button.